See, today is Tuesday, October 17th, and we're going to call this work session to order and take note that Toby Scott is here. We'll take a note of that, that Steve Cannell and John Middleton are absent tonight. And for the presentation for our community history chapter for the growth policy, Alan Tiefenbach. Thanks.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Alan Tiefenbach, Long Range Planner. I'm hoping this is going to be relatively simple tonight. There's pretty short sections. I did want to give you a couple of little updates just before we get started on things I think you'd be interested in. The first one is this coming Monday at 5:30, there's going to be a work session at Council on the growth policy, and it's going to be very comprehensive. We've got about an hour and a half set aside. And there's going to be a pretty detailed presentation. So for those that maybe have walked into this in the middle of it and haven't been there from the beginning, or just those that want a refresher, if you're interested in that kind of thing, there's going to be a lot of information on that. So again, it'll be this Monday at 5:30 in the council chambers. That'll be Dave and I both doing it. There's been some discussion about this conference room, and the reason why we've been having it here, as you know, is because of the multimedia capabilities. You've got the great camera stuff, and you can stream it in real time. But there's been some discussion about, do we need to stream it in real time, or can we just record these work sessions, and do we really need to have the full camera capability and sound, because there's some advantage to that room. It's just more personal, it's not so formal, it tends to get more of a dialogue. I believe Mr. Boland also had the same comment about this. I believe it was you, Phil. So I've heard this input a few times. I think that's what we're moving towards. If you don't have any issues with that, if you don't care if you're an HDMI or not. Yes, sir.
How many people actually watch streaming?
I don't know if we actually have a way that can be accounted for. I know at least one. My mom watches in Arizona. I know that. So, we could all do it for my mom. Hi, Mom. Or we can just have it in the conference room. So if you don't have any qualms on that, I think that's the direction we're going probably for the next work session. So real quickly, just to kind of give you a timeline, the way it seems to me things are going, you just have to understand how dynamic this is, because I have multiple things happening at the same time at any given time. There's a lot of overlap, and we're doing the best we can to keep it on track, but things change. So you're seeing the history set. So if you remember last month, we talked about there's like a setting and a planning framework section. It's the beginning of the plan. That's what I have here. It's the planning framework part, setting. That's kind of the lead into the plan. That's all the fluff that kind of sets the tone and tells you about the city. So you saw the background section last month, the framework, the climate, what was the other thing? Planning, the summary, the purpose of the plan, how it's organized, and all that stuff. This month, you're going to see a short section that I wrote on a basic history of whitefish. I didn't want to get into a lot of details. I just wanted to basically summarize how we got here, where we're at today. Next month, we are intending to bring the demographics section to you. That's roughly 9 pages, and that's so that'll be talking about population, income levels, median home price, population projections. It goes and looks all the way from when Montana starts and kind of how Flathead County and all the other counties, fastest growing counties, have developed. So I think you'll find that kind of thing interesting. So again, that will be this next month, will be the demographics. We are well into, and I'm feeling relatively comfortable about the environment, natural resources, and hazards plan element. That is going to be a relatively long section. As I'm writing it now, I'm thinking it's going to be between 25 and 28 pages. The schedule right now is to get that in front of you in December, and I'm expecting it's not going to happen in one session. So know that that's going to be a robust section. I will get it to you at least a few weeks early, if not earlier, but it's big, there's a lot there. It's ended up being more complicated because those issues are such a big deal here in Whitefish. So it's a pretty big section. After that, and that's gonna be in December. After that, January, February, whenever we get through that, probably we'll be cycling back with you on the economic development element, because you've only seen the goals and the objectives so far. You haven't really seen the whole background set. You've seen the report, but you haven't actually seen the entire plan element. So that'll be coming to you after that. I don't know what the timing is yet, whenever we get done with the environment section. Then, in January, I will be starting on the public facilities and transportation section. I'll be writing that. We will be writing that. I don't think that's going to take a lot of time because we already have a lot of that stuff. We've already done a transportation plan recently. We've got a recent extension of the services plan. A lot of this is going to be just summarizing the information and kind of looking at, is there anything else that needs to be done in regard to transportation and these kinds of things. So, I'm giving that roughly 4 months. After that, then we'll be having this community check-in that we've talked about. I don't know how we're going to do that exactly yet, but it's basically going to be a town hall style thing where we're going to do an outreach and say, hey, community, getting ready to start land use and housing. This is the one everybody likes to get involved with. That'll be roughly around April or May. And about that time is when we'll be starting land use and housing. And there's a lot of discussions to be had about what that's going to look like and how the involvement is going to work. But that is intended to go on between 6 and 7 months. That's a lot of work. Fortunately, I've done a lot of work on it already. So a lot of the background stuff that you haven't seen is already done. And then the last thing is, Dave and I have talked about this, and I've got this outline, right? And this is kind of what I'm using to just keep me on track because it's so complicated and to kind of let you know where we're at. I'm not positive that the final plan is going to be organized like this. The way this is written more like a textbook than a book, so it's meant to be read. You don't have to read it from cover to cover. It's kind of like you can read a chapter or an element or a section. They're all standalone pieces. The reason why I'm saying that is I don't know how it's going to be assembled yet in the long run. Once we have everything written in every of these little completed sections, then we'll arrange it, but I'm not exactly sure yet how. I have a few different ideas, but once it's written is when I'll really know. And then the last thing is, I don't know, we want to have as much of it as we can to approved by May of 2026. That's 3 years from when the legislator approved this. Will we have a final product that's done with a professional layout and publication? I don't know. We're still looking at that. I'm still talking to Dave about that because, we may want to hire actually someone professionally to do the actual design on it. Because I have a design eye, but I'm not a professional graphic designer. So to be continued, but I just thought I'd give you all that stuff. Any questions? Yeah, Phil.
First draft reviewed by CDB on September 19th. That's Saturday.
That was last month, September. Yeah, no worries. There's a lot happening. There's a lot to keep track of. Okay, so with that, any other questions? I guess the first thing before we jump into history is we've now seen this 3 or 4 times. There was again some comments on the vision statement. What you're seeing here was the most recent comments that were done. There was a comment about moving a sentence. There was a comment about doing a little bit better about the housing. I think it originally said we will endeavor or something like that. I think the sentiment was that's really not enough. So the language was we will continue to pursue all opportunities. And then there was a tweak on the sustainability and community part. But this is the most recent vision statement based on the last 3 sessions. All of the little theme statements underneath will all change. But I just wanted to get the general statement together because that's the framework of the plan and that's kind of how I'm writing this plan. Does that make sense? But you want to just, with the history section, because we've only got about 15 minutes, you want me to just run through paragraph, or you want me to just ask you what your comments are, or how would you like to do this, Madam Chair?
So I'm guessing that all of us have reviewed it pretty well. I don't think there's any need to run through paragraph by paragraph unless you want to lead and say, does anybody have a comment on each paragraph? But maybe just accepting comments would
Yeah,
be
so what I'll
sufficient.
do is I'll just make a red mark, basically what will be my red mark copy. And I can just go through here if you have comments and mark it on this. How about that? Overall, I take it everybody read this? Overall, do you feel it's accurate? I mean, I have quite a few different sources. One of them was the book. I read the entire book from Stumptown to Ski Town. I went through all of them. This is harder than you think, but I went through all of the minutes starting from 1980 to present to make sure there wasn't any, and it's a lot, thousands and thousands of pages, kind of scanning through them, just looking for major events, basically. I wasn't trying to read everything, but I was scanning them, just looking for, is there anything big that we missed to get some of the timelines right? It's already been internally through the department, so people have weighed in on it and made their corrections internally. So that kind of vetting has happened before it has gotten to you.
I think it looks good, it reads well, it's succinct for what a broad period it spans. It has a positive tone, which I like, even in the end, it's great. And I only have a couple of small suggestions.
And, sorry, my last comment is what I hope to do, I haven't done it yet, is go talk to the Stumptown Museum and see if I can get at least a few pictures that kind of correlate with this, because I want the the community plan to be really graphic. So I'm hoping I'll get some pictures that they'll give me authorization for so I can put them in here.
Anybody like to start with comments, or we can just kind of go down the line? John, go ahead.
Okay, I thought it was very good.
Thank you.
And I have a few, since Steve isn't here, I'll do some wordsmithing. So in the first paragraph, says the fellow built a cabin at the mouth of the Whitefish River. Isn't the mouth where it would empty into the Flathead River?
Mouth's usually where the river starts.
Really? Okay. I'm wrong.
I mean, I would think that would be that's the exit. So the mouth would be starting at Whitefish Lake.
Yeah,
The exit of the Whitefish
yeah,
River would
I could
be,
figure that the cabin.
and then
was
the
there.
mouth of the Flathead River would be starting up in Glacier.
Well, we're, White,
Oh, right.
okay, I would suggest that you,
Yeah, that's what it should be, the head? So
Yeah,
you're
so-
saying, wow, who knew? I didn't.
I thought it should
Build
be
a cabin
head.
at the head?
Yeah. A river mouth is where the river flows into a larger body of water,
aha, I was,
such as another river, a lake, reservoir, etc.
Who knew? Apparently John, but not me.
okay, I would recommend that you cite sources so that this is kind of a document that's a reference point for others to go to and find things, like citing the book Stumptown to Ski Town and anything else that you might have been relying on generally. Oh, boy, okay.
No, I did. Most of it came from either Stumptown or Ski Town or minutes from the city.
Okay.
Painful.
So then, page 3, says the aluminum plant closed in the 1980s. That's not correct.
What paragraph is that, John?
Second paragraph, 5th line down.
That's not correct?
Yeah, well, my law firm represented 900 workers for failure to share profits, and their best profits years were 90, 91, 92, 93.
So close in the 90s?
Yeah, I think late 90, I'm not sure. It might even be a little after 2000, but I don't
Huh.
know.
I got that from the web, so that could be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I
I can check
guarantee
that
you it
date.
didn't close in the 80s.
I can check that date.
Could say 90s, I guess.
I'll make a note here to check that date.
And then on the last page, middle paragraph, it says 8.4% between 20 and 21. I'm not, that's a little vague. I'd like to understand the dates better. Between 20 and 21, there's only one day, you know, New Year's Day.
Well,
which is
it's
between
it's based on this, what the census gave me between 20 and 21.
You could say for 20 and 21, and that would imply both years.
Roughly
But between throws me off anyway.
two. I say it again, I'm still not following.
I would say use for instead of between.
4.
And then 4.8% for 21 and 22.
Okay. Okay.
And then the median home price in Whitefish is a pretty important item, and how it's gone up, it's certainly part of our history. Maybe we could have more precise dates on when it was, the median home price was $447, and when 2 years later it rose to over $1 million. I think it's important enough to get it specific.
I can look. Again, this is coming from the census.
You know, I have a suggestion. The Department of Revenue has all these numbers down to a T, and it might be, in terms of accuracy, you know, they've got them for the are you talking about the Flathead, or you're talking about just Whitefish proper, you know, Big Mountain? I mean, they can get you an accurate number to plug
But
in.
I don't think they'll give me a year. I don't know if they'll give me a month, but I'll look. I mean, I'll try. I could probably, it's easy to get it now. It's a little tougher to get anything 2000, I don't know, Dave, do you have any comments on that? I'll look. I don't know. Generally, the stuff is just listed by year. I go to the census and I go to the Department of Commerce. It doesn't give me a month, it gives me a year. I'll look.
I'd
See
be
what-
happy to help, Ellen. I work with the Department of Revenue quite frequently, so.
And the last thing is, I'm curious what you left out. I mean, it could be very, very long, so what events did you leave out?
Well, I wanted to do a super general overview. I don't want to open up the barrel of monkeys. Reading the minutes that I did, starting in 1980, the event, the issue that I read the most about was two things. It was the landscaping along 93 South, and it was the widening of the sidewalks on Central. That went on for years. But other than that, the Mountain Mall, the bigger subdivisions, I wanted it to be basic, so I didn't want to get too far into the weeds on it.
Well, it looks like you made good choices.
But no, there's nothing major that I left out other than a lot of fighting about the downtown sidewalks.
Okay, well, that's it for me.
All right, thanks, John. We'll move pretty quickly here so we can get to the regular meeting at 6, I guess. Oh, there is no regular meeting today?
Oh, yeah, there is.
There is?
Yes. We have one Board of Adjustment matter and some housekeeping on
There is a
sides.
regular meeting
There is a
today.
regular meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna go through this pretty quickly. Phil, do you have anything specific?
I'm satisfied with John's comments.
All right, so nothing from Phil. I just had a couple of things. Anywhere that you have a year that's broad, like 1980s or 1930s, lose the apostrophe unless it's actually possessive. That kind of goes back and forth in a few of these drafts. And then page 3, about 5 sentences down, the sentence, some of the veterans who had served on in the U.S. Army 10th Division, you might mean served on, like continued to serve on in. But
Sorry, where are we?
page 3, the first paragraph,
Okay, say it
about
again.
5 sentences down,
Okay,
some of the veterans who had served on in,
oh, whoops.
probably lose the on, keep the in.
Okay,
And otherwise, it looks really, really nice. Thank you. I'll head over to Toby. Do you have any comments? No from Toby. Scott, anything from you?
I just thought it was, I just thought it was exceptionally well-written.
thank you.
The only comment I have is the very last sentence, where it says vibrant walkable. You've got a space between the end of walkable and the comma.
I'm sorry, one more time, Scott?
The very last sentence
Okay,
says Whitefish is a vibrant, walkable, authentic community. There's a space in there between
Oh.
walkable and the comma.
see it. Okay,
That's the only change I have.
So we've had a few people from the public join us, and we're just doing our work session before the regular meeting starts, but this is the place for public comment for this work session, which you probably don't have one. So we'll, unless you really have something to say on this, we'll close the public comment. And then we'll see if there's anything else from planning staff on this. No? All right, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the work session and pick up in just a few minutes with our regular meeting. So we are adjourned.
to get the meeting done pretty quickly for you.
All right, we'll call to order now the regular meeting for the Whitefish Community Development Board. It's October 17th, and noting that Chair Quinnell is absent, so Vice Chair Whitney Beckham sitting in. And also our other member, John Middleton, is absent, and everyone else is present, so we have a quorum tonight. And does anyone have any agenda changes? We only have 2 items on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the August 15th minutes. Can I get a motion to approve? Okay, motion made by Toby Scott and seconded by Phil Bolin. And we have a comment from, okay.
I'm voting.
Voting? All right. Do we vote on this? Vote to approve the minutes? All right, so we'll take a show of hands to vote to approve the minutes. Okay, motion passes. The minutes are approved from August 15th, 2024. And now is the time that we have communications from the public. So we have our 2 things on the agenda tonight, which the audience is probably aware of those 2. If you have something outside of those 2 agenda items, this is your time to come up and speak to us at the podium. Anybody have something that's not on the agenda? All right, thank you. Okay, and any unfinished business from anyone? Seeing none, we will move on to our 2 items. So the first item is WZV 24-06, and this is a request for a variance. And we'll hear from staff on this.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Board, so this is a request from Ford Scott on behalf of WS Property Investments for a variance to the off-street parking requirements of 11633 to use 2 leased parking spots off-site instead of the required on-site parking space that's required for a second-floor residential use above commercial in the downtown WB3 zone. And it's for a building located at 300 East 2nd Street, which is formerly the Masonic Temple, currently has Lula's on the ground floor. I'm sure you're familiar with that building. So it is WB3 zoning district. Within that zone, off-street parking is not required for commercial uses. However, residential uses require parking. So the standard number of spaces if it's on the ground floor for residential. But if you have residential above ground floor commercial, then it's required to have 1 off-street parking space for each residential unit. And this particular site is built lot line to lot line. There is no off-street parking spaces available. So the request would be to, rather than have an on-site space, that they would be able to lease spaces off-site at the city parking garage. In the application, they state that they intend to use the unit for long-term rentals, but that zoning district, the B3, does allow short-term rentals for residential properties. And in the past, we've had quite a few inquiries about that space, just because it's been for lease or for sale for several years. Staff's consistently told people that they can't use it for short-term rentals because we have to have, one of the requirements for short-term rentals is that all off-street parking spaces are required to be on-site. Currently, there is a kitchen within there. Once upon a time, apparently it was used as a hostel. Most recently, it was a private school in there. There is no grandfathering for any of that. You know, whether it was technically used for residential or not, a hostel would have been a hospitality use anyway. We did add an ability to lease off-site spaces to our code based on some changes to state law that happened last year. But that would only apply to multifamily of 5 units or more. And so our stipulation does not allow any kind of residential use of 1 to 4 units to use off-site parking or shared parking. And one of the concerns with off-site parking is how do we manage a lease if someone was to get a lease at an off-site space? because that parking would be, something to be required in perpetuity. Most leases have a time limit on them. Additionally, within the parking garage, when we lease out spaces, we utilize the person's license plate, because we have a license plate scanner to determine if someone is legally in the lease spaces or not. If someone was to use that for short-term rentals where the plates change weekly or daily, that'd be impossible to keep up with, so that might be a difficult thing. So we did put a notice in the paper. We did receive 4 comments supporting the request, which I included on the table for you guys, that came after the report came out. In evaluating any variance request, the board has to find that all the following conditions are met or are not pertinent. So the conditions that are in the code, and this is based on state law, one of which is strict compliance with the regulations would limit the reasonable use of the property. Currently, it's a commercial building. There's a reasonable use to continue commercial uses. That building has been in use perpetually of some sort of use on that second floor. And so it would not limit the reasonable use of the property as a reasonable use. The second one would be, does it deprive the applicant of rights enjoyed by other properties similarly situated in the district? The ability to provide or have residential use above ground floor commercial is predicated on having off-street parking. Not all buildings downtown are eligible to have residential use, and many of them don't because of that standard. Other buildings have been redeveloped to include some space on their property for off-site parking, so they could do residential uses upstairs. But based on our code's strict compliance with the terms of the regulations, would not deprive them of a right enjoyed by other properties. We have, in my time with the city of 17 years, I've never seen a parking variance granted. Not that one couldn't be if someone could show that they have a hardship, but it's just not something that other buildings downtown have. So just notice, and then the hardship is a result of lot size, shape, topography, or other circumstances. I mean, the lot on that building exists since 1915. There is a constraint on it that there's no room for off-street parking. But most older buildings downtown are built to 0 setbacks, and we actually require buildings to be built to 0 setbacks in the WB3 because we're trying to encourage more retail uses on the ground floor. Is this particular to the property? Majority of older buildings downtown are built with 0 lot lines, so it really isn't unique to this particular building, and a lot of them don't have any off-street parking. Was the hardship created by the applicant? It was not created by the applicant. That building stood in its current location since 1915. The applicant's not claiming an economic hardship. Would it grant or adversely affect neighboring property owners? I mean, it's unlikely that it would impact any neighboring property owners. Residential parking would probably have less impact than parking for commercial use, but however, enforcing the actual use of leased parking would be challenging for the city anyway. It is the minimum variance that's requested to alleviate the hardship. Would this variance confer a special privilege that's denied other properties? Basically, we feel like it would, because really there are no other properties downtown that have residential uses that don't have off-street parking available or haven't created it somehow. So based on those findings, because not all of them are consistent with that, the variance does not support the approval of the request. However, if you guys disagree with some of those findings, we did provide some alternative findings of fact in the staff report. And then if you were to approve it, there are several conditions that we would recommend adding to that, including that they maintain ownership of a parking or enter into a long-term lease that would be approved by the city legal department. And then they would file a deed restriction with the clerk and recorder's office that the property be only used for residential long-term rentals and not short-term rentals. And then that off-street parking, off-site lease must be recorded on the property at the Flathead Clerk and Recorder's office. A copy of the recorded document prior to applying for a building permit. So a copy of that lease. And that is all. I'd be glad to answer any questions for you.
All right, any questions for Dave about this? Dave, I have a question.
Sure.
How many spots are available for someone to lease just currently? I mean, how many overall, and then how many are actually available to be leased that aren't currently leased. Does
You're
that make
talking about in our
sense?
parking garage here?
In the parking garage.
You know, I don't know the exact number. I don't administer that. I know there are lease spaces available on the top floor. It's not fully leased out. I can't remember the total number of ones that are available for lease, but it is the second and third floors are all available for lease.
Okay,
But they're open to the public after 6 p.m.
okay. All right, any further questions? Toby? No? All right, so,
The suggested conditions, if we were to recommend approval, for residential rentals of 30 days, that, I guess it qualifies as long-term, 30 days?
According to our code, yep.
Because it seems to me that a rental of 30 days around here, especially in the summertime, could put people in there every month a different group.
Yep, and that is allowed in all our residential zones. It's based on state law. We have no ability to regulate that timeline based on the Montana Landlord Tenant Act.
So then we can't make it 6 months or a year or anything like that. Okay, that's all I was curious about. Thank you.
go ahead, Phil.
Can a temporary parking permit be used on a vehicle for short term in the garage, so you wouldn't have to change the license or check the license plates?
You know, our current system's based on license plate recognition, and so when someone leases a spot, they put their license plate in the system, and then when the parking enforcement goes by, it comes up as, yes, you have a lease space, or no, you don't, you get a ticket. So
One couldn't put a temporary parking permit in the rear window?
yeah, that'd be something you'd have to talk to, you know, the Michelle or whoever administers, or the police department, the parking enforcement program.
Well, we're only talking about 2 spaces, correct?
Potentially, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, and
course.
I'm just now closing this portion. We have an order that we go through. So now we've asked questions of the staff, and you guys are also welcome to pick up an agenda at the back if you want to kind of see where we are in the process. But now we're finished with questions from staff, I believe, no further. So at this point, we'll open the public hearing, and first we'll hear from the applicant. So you may come up and state your name and address, and take a few minutes to let us hear you.
Madam Chairman and Board, thank you very much for having me tonight. My name is Ford Scott. I'm the applicant for WS Property Investments.
Just one moment, I want to make sure that your microphone is on and working.
Is that better?
It is.
Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
thank you.
Get it up a little higher. There we go. Thank you so much for having me. In going through this, I think Dave read through most of the variance requests, but just to be clear, we are seeking to convert the second floor space of 300 East 2nd Street into one large residential unit. It will not be multiple units. It is just one single unit that we are seeking a variance for. We are also not seeking a variance for short-term rental. We do believe in reading through the special warranty deed that this building is unique. It's on a 0 lot line. If you read the special warranty deed, it was always, it opens with Bricks Condominiums, a residential and commercial unit. So we do believe that residential is the highest and best use for this location. Lula's, an example, has been there 20 years. There's been a constant turnover on the second floor. It's not really commercial space because it kind of lacks street level visibility, signage, parking. That's kind of why we believe that it truly is much more of a residential unit. In seeking the variance request, one thing that we were asking is to pay in advance for 2 parking spots in the parking garage. We understand that the license plate reader is of a concern. We were willing to register full-time 2 vehicles in the parking garage, so that you are aware that it is those 2 cars that are registered to that space, and those are the 2 cars that are used along with that space. So there's no questions about different vehicles coming in and out or anything of that regard. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we truly believe that this building, it's a really cool building. It's in need of a lot of work, for nice, terminology. It needs a lot of money put into it. I don't believe that under the commercial standards right now that you're ever going to get somebody that can do that, because the rental that can be obtained commercially is not going to justify the price. It's never going to offset that. So I think somebody coming in like us and putting in a lot of money and making it what it needs to be is really going to make the residential unit that it should be. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's kind of jumbled.
Questions? Go ahead, John.
Dave mentioned a law passed by the legislature last session which would allow this. I have it on. Maybe this will help.
Thanks, John.
That if it's 5 units and up, then off-site parking is okay. Or was it 4?
I believe it's 5.
It's
5.
5, okay. Have you considered making this 5 units?
We have not. In our preliminary site plan interior, what we had was 4 bedrooms in the back and then a large open space. I think it would be pretty difficult to fit 5, to be honest with you.
How many square feet overall do you have to work with?
Approximately 3,800 square feet.
So,
But some of it's offset. There's an attic component and a 3rd floor.
yeah, so that'd be 5, almost, we'll call it 700 square foot units, which are small, but there are such things in Whitefish. I don't know. I would encourage you to consider that.
Would it classify as, would that meet the threshold?
I mean, you would still have to provide the spaces if you had
But
5
even if
units
it's
in
one,
there.
even if it's just 1 unit, they're not for individual lease. Does that make sense? I just want to be clear.
Well, you'd have to be 5 individual self-contained units, each with a kitchen.
Yeah, I think that would be really hard.
Yeah,
And it may
I
work
imagine
for
it would
somebody, but for us, we're more interested in, one thing that we've noticed is that there's not a lot of 4-bedroom kind of downtown rentals. There's really not. So a lot of opportunities for 2 families. So that was what really kind of made it attractive to us on a long-term basis. And
I'm asking because I'm sympathetic to your application, but I think there are problems getting it through the variance regulations. So we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
And isn't it wouldn't you, for commercial use, wouldn't you have to have a walk up from street level?
Yes.
You
I'm not
enter
sure.
at street level and you go down to Lula's, but
You
you
do.
have to go up to a commercial location. to
That is
walk
correct.
upstairs. That's not very convenient or competitive, I would say.
And I think that's been the big problem
Yeah,
commercially.
okay.
I think you've had a lot of turnover in that regard. And, the last tenant was a great tenant. It's a school, but they're capped on what they can pay. You're never going to attract the Class A commercial user when you don't have on-site parking, you don't have signage, and you're not street level. It's always going to be a hindrance for it to be a commercial space. So again, that's why we truly believe that the highest and best use for that second floor is residential. The first floor where Lula's is probably commercial. You can see it street level, you've got the activity, but I think that's why you have a constant turnover of commercial uses on that second floor.
All right, any further questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Toby.
4 bedrooms. Do you plan on renting this monthly?
Long-term rental, monthly. To be very honest with you, it would be pretty limited. I think we have a lot of really cool ideas for it, and we're gonna put a lot of money into it. I don't wanna do short-term rental, I don't wanna get it torn up, like, you know, you want
Well,
it,
I'm considering,
it would only be 30
short-
days, 30-day rental minimum.
so you'll be turning people over every month.
Yes, sir. So, some months. I think it'll rent out in
How
the
are you
summer
going
and a
to,
few others, but
how are you going to get by the parking restriction? You say you'll register 2 plates. Is that going to be rental vehicles that will go with the unit?
yes, sir. It would be full-time rental vehicles.
So
So
then
they
people-
would be registered to the unit
Yeah,
and they
but
would be
people
there
will come
full-time.
into town and rent the unit, including 2 vehicles,
Correct,
and know that it's over there.
correct. Yes, sir.
So-
That was the only way we could think of, to be fair with the city, to alleviate that problem.
Yeah.
That way when they, you know, they're driving in, and we also offered, I don't want you guys having to hound us or chase us down, we offered to pay in advance on a yearly basis or even up to 5 years in
So
advance, so you know you don't have to.
I'm just guessing that the monthly rental is going to be of an amount that someone living locally that perhaps had 3 teenage kids and need of 4 bedrooms would not be able to afford it?
I don't think so, no, sir. But again, I think it's just to be very completely honest, it's the metrics of what we have to pay to buy it from the seller and what we intend to put into it.
Yeah.
We're not trying to exclude locals. We're also not trying to do short-term rentals and drive up pricing, but
Well, I'm considering 1 month to still be
Yes, sir.
somewhat short-term as opposed to 6 months or a year.
I will say, I think our 1 month, I think we're kind of unique owners. We're looking at this very long-term. We just think it could be a really cool project. We're not, our long-term monthly rental will be basically enough to cover what our monthly nut would be, so.
Thank you.
So are you in the process of, or is this sale, your purchase, is it contingent on some things at this point? You're not,
It would be contingent upon this approval. If it's
Okay.
commercial space, we can't pay what we are under contract for. We can't put in the amount of money that we need to. It just,
yeah,
just
I
doesn't work.
understand that. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Nope.
I guess just one, so is this condoed?
yes, sir, it's the Bricks condominiums.
Okay.
And per the special warranty deed, which I included, that it does state that unit number 2 of the Bricks condominiums, a residential and commercial condominium. So we do believe that it is residential, so, for what that's worth.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much.
Any other comments from the audience? Come up and state your name and your address, please.
Hello, Council. My name is Carly Tuman, and I actually live in Kalispell, 670 Fifth Avenue. I am a property manager here in the Flathead Valley. I have my own business. It's just me, one-person show. I manage both short-term rentals and second homes here in Whitefish, and I also have had my property manager's license for about 15 years, so I've done long-term management for rentals 30 days and over. So I have a lot of experience in both working with the city of Whitefish with my short-term rentals as well as managing long-term rentals. I work with Mr. Scott on some other things, and as he moves forward with his project, I would be working on it with him and providing him the guidance to ensure that any residents are signing a proper rental agreement, following all of the tenant landlord laws, and being in compliance with any other ordinances and rules that they need to follow while they're staying in the city of Whitefish. So just wanted to share that part of the business transaction that he's looking to move forward with. So yeah, do you have any questions for me?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment on this? Please come up and state your name and your address.
Hi, my name's Rhett Johnson. I'm at 405 Blanchard Lake Drive in Whitefish. I'm the other side of this deal. I am currently the owner of the unit. I don't have a lot more to add other than to maybe say that as we've considered uses for the space in the next phase since the school vacated the property. We've also felt pretty strongly that a residential application is probably the best use for the space for all the reasons that were noted. We've thought about lots of other possibilities, and we may be in the position, I mean, contingent on this decision, of finding other uses for the property and other tenants. That would be what we'll proceed with, or a sale to somebody who would do the same thing. But I mean, just the configuration of the space, it'd be a very nice sort of walk up from the street, but at the same time has its limitations as a commercial, in commercial applications. I generally believe has nothing to do with this particular space, I suppose, but it's good to have people living downtown, and I think that in this particular case, it is sort of an ideal use. Just the way that it's got the kitchen and the way the space works, you can't really break it up conveniently into multiple units. It would be awkward to do so. It could be just a great use for the space, and it's something that we had considered even as the next phase as owners to do some sort of conversion like this. So also thinking that it's bricks condominiums, including residential, we certainly considered that as a next phase in the project for us. So we'd end up seeking a very similar variance, I imagine, if we ended up down the road and finding an opportunity to convert it into residential, which I do think is the best use for it. Otherwise, we are looking for commercial applications, and the applicant's correct. I mean, it's difficult to put significant money into the unit right now to sort of bring it up to what it really ought to be, and without using it for its best intended use. It needs that kind of TLC and investment, and I think that this is what probably allows that to happen. We bought this unit when my wife and her business partners had this sort of passion project at the school. They found another location for it, and it was always our intention to have it for long enough to let that get off the ground, and now they're off the ground and have moved to a different location, and we just got to find the best use for the space for the city, and I do think this is probably it, if you can figure out a way to consider it with the variance laws. So anyway, that's my perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Oh, of course, I'm sorry.
How many bathrooms are on that second floor?
There are currently two bathrooms. When you walk up, there's a kitchen on the left, and right off the kitchen, there's two bathrooms that have a toilet and sink, and in one of them a urinal. There's no shower space in the unit now. That would need to be converted, but there's the two bathrooms.
Okay. Just regarding the unit, have you considered making it an event venue, which it was many years ago?
We have thought about an event venue. The economics of sort of leasing that out for an event each time, and you need it to be used like pretty much every weekend at a relatively high rent in order to make that work. I'm not sure the business model would sort of support a use for that. I didn't honestly crunch that out, but we've been thinking more about leasing it to, frankly, we've been thinking about, it was a shared use space for a while, a shared workspace for a while. We've had inquiries about salons, we've had inquiries about medical facility to be in that space. Those are the kinds of people who've asked us about the space. So those would be the alternative uses. I don't think they're as good as this. But an event space, I kind of don't think that the numbers are going to work to make that happen. It's possible, but it's not something we've seriously looked into. So
I was just curious.
Yeah.
It used to be that
yeah,
for a period of time, and
yeah.
there was other places around, Whitefish Ballroom, which is no more. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Mr. Rhett? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and I'll be ready for a motion on this. from the board?
I'd like to make a motion to deny the variance.
Motion heard.
I'll second it.
All right, so motion made by Scott and seconded by Toby. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, John.
Well, as I said before, I am quite sympathetic to this, but I can't see much way around these variance rules. So Dave has kindly given us some findings that we might enter if we were to approve it. That's at page 6. First finding is that these regulations will limit reasonable use. I think we could make a positive finding there because residential use is reasonable, as you have explained. The second one I have a problem with. It requires, well, the regulation is strict compliance with the terms of these regulations will deprive the applicants of a right enjoyed by other properties. That's hard to get around because the other properties, as discussed in the staff report, have one way or another arranged for off-street parking on site. So I don't see how we can get past that one. The third one I think we can get past because this is a hardship due to the lack of, or due to the presence of on-site parking requirement, which personally I don't see as that important. You wouldn't see that in England or France, or because they can't have on-site parking. So that would be an other hardship. So that one I can get past. And then the last one is whether or not the hardship is peculiar to this property. And I can't get past that one because, as the findings point out, the majority of older buildings in downtown Whitefish are built with 0 setbacks and no off-street parking. So there's 2 of these findings that I can't get around. And maybe I can get some help with that. But that we have to make a positive finding on all of them, all 9. So I've got 2 that I can't be positive on.
All right, further discussion? Sorry, we've already closed, so we can't take any further public comment, but this will, this is a decision that we're making. So we're discussing now, and then we'll take a vote. So that's that. Thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to also point out on finding 9, underneath the first 4, as staff has indicated, I think Dave said, they've never granted a variance of this kind in the past. And I think that if we did grant that variance, we would be conferring a special privilege that then subsequent property owners around town might get wind of, and we may see some more of these coming across our agendas. So I don't think that finding 9 is met either.
Any further discussion?
I agree with Scott. I think that turning it into a residential place is going to be just for the purpose of renting it out to out-of-towners, out-of-staters, visitors that come in. A family of 2, $10,000 a month would be entirely reasonable. Because during the summertime, a single studio unit apartment, 3 years ago, friends of mine rented one for $3,000 for 1 week. So I could see that this place being rented out for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Because if it was 2 families in there and they had built it up for a couple of bathrooms, $10,000 a month seems like a lot to us. But somebody from California or something going, well, that boils down to $2,500 a week, which is actually cheaper than this 1-bedroom house that friends of mine rented. So I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you, Toby. John, further comment?
One thing I left
discussion.
out was on finding 9, in response to Scott, I did find a way around that one. We could say they're not being conferred a special privilege because in the future, others could do it as well, once they get wind of it. So maybe that's a little dubious, but I do have problems with findings 2 and 4, so.
All right, and I'll comment briefly before we take a vote. I'll be voting for the motion to deny. I also think that there are too many of these regulations that we cannot square with this. Since it is strict compliance, it has to be each one. I feel like we fully understand both sides of the members of the public that have spoken. One as an owner, one as a potential buyer. There may be different ways for you guys to work something out and get around this, but unfortunately, a 1-bedroom with strict compliance regulation on parking, even though you've really thought outside of the box, and it seems to be a good placement for that, doesn't mean that we can go outside of these regulations. So, the suggestion to look at more units, I think that, the implication and the statement in both your application and then tonight by you is, what a beautiful place to live. Isn't it nice to have a mix of living? And I think that's part of why we have these regulations, because it really is, we really have to look at, is this a residential use? And it might be a different thing to live rather than to have a 30-day, you guys have been very honest with us. You're not looking to rent this probably for a year or more. That would be great if you could, but to make the money make sense. And that's not truly living downtown Whitefish. So, I love that argument. To live downtown is great, have a mix, but it's difficult to mesh that with the strict compliance of these 9 things. So hopefully you can find a way to make this building work as residential or a good commercial use. So we'll go ahead and take a vote now for just a moment. WZV 24-06. All in favor of the motion to deny the variance, raise your hand. Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you guys for coming in. All right, so we'll move on to thank you. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, WZTA 24-03. So this one is for recommendation by us for city zoning, and we'll hear from Dave on this.
Yep, good evening again. So staff's proposing to amend 5 sections of the sign code for housekeeping and clarification purposes. And they specifically relate to how the sign code deals with bulletin boards, flag clearances, ground-mounted sign vision triangles, sidewalk A-frame signs, and park monument signs. The first one we're going to discuss is the bulletin boards. There's been kind of a scourge lately of people putting up posters on the posts and columns of all the overhangs downtown on Central Avenue and other places downtown. Mostly because there's a limited amount of areas for people to post upcoming events. Currently, there is nothing in our code that exempts bulletin boards unless they're not visible from the street right away. So we're looking at potentially adding a code that would allow for a place that does have events like bars, restaurants, things like that, to be able to have a bulletin board where they can advertise those things in order to keep the posters from being placed on public property or stapled on buildings or stapled on the posts. So what we were proposing would allow a 12 square foot bulletin board. Currently we do allow 6 square foot menu displays that are exempt for restaurants, bars, and lounges. And so one of the requirements would be that we would add language that they would be kept tidy and that posters could not overhang the edges of them. So that was the first one that we were looking at. The second one is,
I'm sorry, Dave, could I interrupt?
yeah, you have a question?
Yes, so who would be eligible, would this be all businesses that,
Nope, it'd just be,
like?
bars and lounges. Let's see, the
I'm thinking about Marcus, right?
states currently, what their language would be, one display box up to 6 square feet for menus, and a bulletin board up to 12 square feet for events and notices are allowed for each restaurant, bar and lounge, or grocery store. So that would include Marcus.
Thank you.
So yeah, currently, I mean, the one at Marcus is technically not allowed, even though they've had one forever and ever and ever at Marcus. Although I do believe they took it off recently with the remodel, because I looked for it the other day and I didn't see it. But you know, forever and ever, Marcus has had the bulletin board there. And they can get a little untidy because people just come up and stick stuff all over them. And I would put it on the businesses to make sure that they're kept neat and tidy. Flags, we've had some issues with people hanging their flags over the sidewalk, which becomes a public hazard if they hang low enough that people get entangled in them or they stick out over the street where vehicles can hit them, especially if they're attached to something that's in the city public right-of-way, which could be a liability concern. There really wasn't any language in there about how we measure the height or where they measure it, so we're looking at adding language in there that would clarify how we would measure the height. And that if they do stick out over the public street at all, then they have to meet the 15-foot clearance, not the 8-foot clearance because of vehicles. And then we put in an exception because we do allow people to fly flags at street level for Veterans Day and other public holidays. Right now, it's like the city manager gives that exemption, but this would just put that in the code. What started this amendment was because once we were going to do that for this one, we figured we had a few other things that we wanted to clarify. So this, there was a discrepancy in the code for clear vision triangles for freestanding signs. And this came up, so some businesses wanted to put a freestanding sign up and they're like, well, your graphic says it should be 20 feet, but the text says 40 feet, which is it? And we're like, really? No one noticed that all these years? And so we wanted to clarify that. So looking at how we do our clear vision triangles for vegetation, which is basically 20 feet from the property corner. We determined that the 40 feet was actually the one that's in error and that the graphic is correct, so we would amend this so that it would be 20 feet so it's consistent with the rest of the code. A-frame signs is something, sandwich boards that you see downtown. I've long wanted to amend this just because the way the current code reads, it's really hasn't been enforceable and we haven't really been able to figure out how to enforce it, or code enforcement officers that we've hired have come with questions, and we kind of settled into a routine of how we enforced it, but the code didn't really back that up. So we're just fixing that and to make it consistent with how we've been enforcing it. So right now it says that you're allowed one A-frame sign per developed site, but we don't define what developed site is in the code. You know, is it the building? Is it a business? Is it a single lot? And then would it be just one sign per lot or one sign per individual business on a lot? What if there's multiple buildings on a single lot with multiple businesses? Like how many A-frames do you allow? A lot of questions with that. So this would clarify it. And again, we're basically changing it to how we enforce it right now, which is it would allow for one A-frame sign per storefront street level entrance. So if as long as there's a door that's like on Central Avenue on the street, you can have one sign at that door. Every business has a door on the street, then they would be able to have a sign too. If they don't have direct access to the street, like an upstairs business, they could share a A-frame sign. That's how they do it right now, but they would not be able to have their own sign. Phil, do you have a question?
I do have a question. If there's an argument about
There's a what?
An argument about who has a space on that sandwich board, who mediates that?
I mean, that would be up to the business, to the property owner to mediate it. Additional changes that we're looking at adding, right now it says that the signs have to have a 44-inch clearance. We're only going to increase that 4 inches, but 4 feet is just much easier to measure and also improve safety for pedestrians. I considered 5 feet, but I think that would be a little bit of a hardship for some of the businesses, especially if they have, posts and things like that in front of their businesses. but it does help for people with disabilities. But 4 feet of clearance would provide enough room for someone in a wheelchair to get around those signs, or someone that's walking to get around them. Another requirement would be that the sign has to be located within 15 feet of the building entrance, and also not block access to any building, stairs, wheelchair ramps. Additionally, we would add clarification that the signs can't have attached balloons, flags, or other attractants. A lot of times people put balloons on there, and we always have to tell them you cannot do that. It's elsewhere in the code, but this just clarifies that. And also that they can't be illuminated or have electronic, light up language on there. And then one of the things that was in the old code prohibits signs that have individual changeable letters, which basically was intended to be the kind with the slide-in plastic letters. As you can probably see in the staff report picture, there's a picture of those. A lot of times the wind would blow some of the letters off and they kind of look crappy, so the city decided they didn't want to see those. However, we've always allowed someone that has like a dry erase board or a chalkboard to do that, but it wasn't really clear if that was allowed. So we added language that made it clear that chalkboards or dry erase boards are allowed. Also, that there's a new technology out there with magnetic lettering, which is much more, aesthetic looking. That wouldn't be allowed under the regulations I'm proposing. However, if you guys wanted to allow those ones, we could modify it to be able to allow the magnetic attachable letters, but not the plastic slide-in kind. That's just something to talk about for discussion. The other language was added that A-frame signs could only remain out during business hours, and that any sign that was non-compliant may be removed by city staff at any time. We just hold it and then they come pick it up, as long as they promise to deploy it properly. But if it is on a public sidewalk, there's liability with that. So we are also adding a liability clause that exempts the city from liability for any damages or injury for any such sign placed on public property by a business that creates a hazard. So that helps indemnify the city, because most of these are on a public sidewalk. Just to note that code does allow someone to have racks of clothes or other merchandise on the street or on the public sidewalk, as long as there's 6 feet of unobstructed clearance. Any questions or comments about that part?
I have a question. Where did you say that you added that it can be, it's not in this edition right now, that it can be a blackboard or a dry erase board?
That part's in there.
It is.
We're adding that, but in the current code, it doesn't mention that. It just says it can't have changeable
Oh,
letters.
okay, I see it now on 6C.
So if you
Okay.
look at the actual proposed amendments on page 5, that makes it a little clearer. I'll go through those again when I get through the staff report, but just to clarify what the actual language will be. The last one would be park monument signs. Right now, we don't really talk about those. Most of those are in residential zones, and residential zones allow real limited signage. You can have basically 1 2 square foot sign that's flush mounted on a building, or for conditional uses, like commercial conditional uses that might be allowed in a residential zone, you can have 1 10 square foot monument sign that's no more than 4 foot high that might identify a subdivision, apartment, or a non-residential conditional use. Unbeknownst to me, the park board had just approved a plan to put all new signs in all their parks. And unfortunately, their signs did not comply with the 4 foot height limit or the size thing that was in there. And so, in running this by Maria at the parks director, she suggested that maybe we modify this slightly to be able to allow these brand new signs that they're currently just now installing, which there's a photo of in there. And they want them a little taller because they're adding pollinator plants in front of the signs to be able to encourage bees to come in there. And so this change would basically outline that public uses would be exempt, and that those particular signs could be up to 6 feet high and up to 15 square feet, because currently those new ones they're installing are 6 feet high and they're 12.5 square feet. So that's kind of summarizes it. So if we go to the amendments, you can kind of see on page 5 the specifics with regard to the bulletin boards. 1 display box up to 6 square feet for menus and a bulletin board. Up to 12 square feet for events and notices is allowed for a restaurant, bar, or grocery store. And then bulletin boards are exempt that aren't seen from a public right of way as well. And then they must be kept orderly, and posters and handbills that hang outside the borders of the frame must be removed. with regard to the flags, we're just adding language that says if any point of the flag or flagpole projects beyond the curb into the street, the flag must maintain 15 feet of clearance. Clearance is measured from the lowest point of the slack flag to the nearest ground surface below. U.S. flags flown on holidays such as Veterans Day and Memorial Day are exempt from the height requirements above. Last but not least, and I don't know, we do have an exemption for art spot flags. That's something that the city manager approves, that businesses put those up and they don't comply with the sign code. I don't know if we want to add U.S. flags or art spot flags. I mean, I don't know. I think that's something that we can continue to administer through the city manager and not really add to this. But that has come up, like how come there's these art spot flags that don't comply? But it was something that was approved by city council back in the day, and the city manager approves that, so I was pretty okay with that being out of there. And back to the sandwich boards or A-frames, just the list of things on here. You know, that the size is going to remain the same, 2 feet by 6 feet. Must maintain 4 feet of clearance, unobstructed sidewalk pedestrian passage parallel to the street to make it even clearer. Changeable copy signs with manually changeable individual letters are not permitted, but rewritable surfaces such as chalkboards or dry erase boards are allowed. That's how the language would read. And then neither illumination nor electronic components are permitted in A-frame signs. Streamers, balloons, windsock flags, or other materials attached to the A-frame signs are not permitted. A-frame signs must be located within 15 feet of the storefront entrance. An A-frame sign placement may not obstruct an entrance to a building, steps, sidewalk, driveway, wheelchair ramp. No A-frame sign may be placed within the roadway, median, or required off-street parking space. That's something I didn't talk about, but that would be added in there as well. A-frame signs must remain in good condition and be constructed and weighted to avoid being blown or knocked over and creating a hazard. Didn't talk about that either, but we'd add that in there. Then any person or business placing the sign on public property, including sidewalks, assumes any and all liability for any loss, damage, or injury sustained by a person as a result of the negligent installation, placement, use, or maintenance of the sign in a public space. And they may only be displayed during hours of operation. And then signs that do not meet the above requirements are deemed hazardous or are left out when businesses close, or that block sight vision triangle clearances will be removed by the city per, and it references the code for temporary signs. It gives us the ability to remove temporary signs. And then last but not least, under the residential ones, we just add that clause that says freestanding signs for parks and other public uses may not exceed 15 square feet or 6 feet in height. Actually, I see something that needs to be added to this that somehow got neglected, which is under number 1, where it says freestanding signs. Freestanding signs are only permitted for residential subdivision, multifamily residential residences, or non-residential. Should just be cross out the or, non-residential conditional uses or public uses. Because that's the clause that allows those signs. We add language about the size of them, but we didn't add that permitted them in those zones. So it'd say freestanding signs are only permitted for residential subdivision, multifamily residences, comma, non-residential or commercial uses, comma, or public uses. So all these things are made according to the growth policy. Growth policy does say review design standards, propose amendments when necessary, and continue to support the current regulations on billboards. All the other findings are, does support public safety by having standards for A-frame signs and whatnot. And all the other findings do support that. Staff does recommend approval of the text amendment. And if you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I have a question. If we are wanting to make that small amendment, do we need to make a friendly amendment, or can you just do that on your end?
When you make a motion to approve, make that friendly amendment to just
Okay.
make that minor change.
All right.
Dave, there's no mention of feather banners. Is that allowable?
We have a section that expressly prohibits them under our temporary signs.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
But they are allowed
Ready
outside
for-
city limits, so you may see
you
them
asking a
outside of
question?
city limits.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question, Toby.
Under the staff proposal of amendments, the one under exempt, prohibited, and special standards, item number 10, referring to one display box and so on and so forth. I don't know, there's, next to the last sentence is, this does not apply to menu display boxes or bulletin boards that are not intended to be seen from a public right-of-way. Well, if you can't see them from the public right-of-way, is the right-of-way like the sidewalk?
Yeah, so the street, if you
So
can't,
you-
so there,
you
are-
can
so
only
signs,
put up a
technically
bulletin
signs
board where
are,
people can't see it.
no, it says that, this code wouldn't apply to that. In other words, it's okay, you can have signs if if they're not visible from the street. So if someone had a bulletin board right now that you could not see as you were driving down the street or walking down the sidewalk, then the sign code would allow that. You can have incidental signs.
Okay, it's just the wording of it struck me
This
as,
does not apply to menu boxes, or they're not intended to be seen. This is currently in the code right now, but we
that's
just added
not
bulletin boards
intended
to
to
that.
be seen from a public right-of-way.
Yeah. So if it was something inside of like a doorway of a business, where you had to walk into the doorway to look at it, but you really wouldn't see it if you're driving by.
Like at the Remington?
Yeah, they have one in their doorway. And that one's exempt because you can't see it from the street or the road.
Okay.
However,
all
they
right,
would,
That's my only question.
All right, any more questions, staff? Okay, so I will, seeing as we have,
I make a motion that,
you gotta have a public hearing first.
oops,
no public here,
You have to open it and then
I
close it.
will open the public hearing, and now I will close the public hearing. All right, so we're ready for a motion, Toby?
I'll make a motion that we approve staff report WZTA 24-03 as presented, and I'm open for friendly amendments.
All right, I'll make a friendly amendment as per,
Has to have a second first.
Second for-
okay.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Phil Bullen. And I'll make a friendly amendment that we add on 11564 residential districts, A1 under freestanding signs, cross out the word or, put and add a comma there, non-residential conditional uses, and add or public uses, period. As per Dave's catch. All right. Can I get a second on the friendly
I
amendment?
second the amendment.
Okay, thank you, John. So we'll go ahead and have a vote now on.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes, go ahead.
There was one other change. He's talking about the magnetic letters. That we, and I'm looking for it here now. Dave, can you help me on that one?
Well, I just said that you guys should probably you can discuss that if you think that magnetic letters, should be allowed on those things versus the slide. I mean, the slide-in ones aren't allowed. Magnetic ones wouldn't be allowed under how it's drafted. That's historically been the thing. We've had some people in our community that have been very vocal about any signs with slide-in letters. And I know, for instance, Harlow had magnetic letters, and they really fought for those. And there's a lot of discontent with them, with the fact that we had to tell them you can't do that, because they weren't the sliding ones, but they looked really nice. And so, because of that, I think it should be considered. But again, I didn't add it in there because I know that there's some people in the community that probably still not like that. I don't know, but.
Can you direct me to the specific language?
So there is no specific language other than it would be, I don't have a draft language for that. I didn't include that.
Well, there was a section in here.
But in the staff report, it talks about it. It's the end of the second paragraph on page 4,
Okay,
where it says, language remains that prohibits signs with individual changeable letters, but language was added to clarify that it allows chalkboards or dry erase boards. Staff is not certain if signs with individual changeable letters remain an issue with the modern, clean-looking magnetic attachable letters now available, but staff kept that restriction in for now and encourages further discussion on the matter.
So I can see where that is in the code, on page 6 of 9. And on page 6, it is, or the information that you passed out. So on page 6, A6C is
Right.
where it would
That's
be.
what I was looking
Yep.
And my thoughts on that, since we're in discussion of this, would be that we either make it clear that all magnetic are fine, or leave it as it is, because in my thinking, there can still be some pretty cheap magnetic signs, and the issue is them falling or blowing off, and then that's litter.
Yeah.
So I think that's, why, partially why we don't want the balloons, why we don't want the streamers. A magnet can become detached, so I'm not in favor of adding that magnets are okay, because then we have to specify how strong the magnet is. It's not just this aesthetic appeal for me, it's the litter.
I do think the magnets are better than the sliding ones for sure, but as far
Better.
as wind resistance and stuff, but yeah,
But I
just
bet
someone
there's some
can
pretty bad
move 'em around
magnets
and
out
stuff,
there.
but
So you can make a motion if you want
No,
to,
I
or
wanted, I
talk
just
about
wanted to bring it
adding.
up for discussion, see what everybody thought.
Okay. So currently we have a motion to approve and a second, and a friendly amendment and a second on that. So we'll go ahead and take a vote on the motion to approve. Everyone who votes in favor of approving, raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. And the friendly amendment? Hand raised. All right, so unanimous. All right. So,
Make a motion to adjourn?
all right, any matters of good and welfare?
I just wanted to introduce Lauren McDonald. She's our new Planner 1. She's replacing Nelson Loring, who took a job with the city of Kalispell to do economic development for them. Lauren is just starting. She does have a planning degree. She's worked for the city for almost a year now in another capacity, and we're really happy to have her on board. And we also hired a resiliency planner named Tammy Zamoyski. She started last week or 2 weeks ago. She's currently out of town right now, but you'll probably get to meet her soon. So just giving you kind of an update on where we're at staffing wise. And then, yeah, as Alan mentioned, we're going to be having a work session on Monday with the council to talk about the growth policy and just to give them all the information that you guys get and keep them up to date. So you really don't have to be there because it's going to rehash things that you guys have already been through. Yes,
What
sir.
is a resiliency planner?
So she'll be in charge of affordable housing, economic development, as well as multimodal transportation. So looking at, and things like, helping with our wildfire protection plan. So keeping our community resilient in the face of changing times, as in, making sure that we have housing for our workers and that our city's not going to burn down, and that we can have transportation so that everybody can get around, all that kind of stuff. It's just basically an expanded version of our housing coordinator planner position.
Does that reflect the change that, in the redlining portion of the introduction, the vision part of the, I noticed that the word resiliency was inserted. I thought it was in response to our discussion last time, but is that what it's referring to?
I mean, that's what that term refers to. I don't think it was specifically added because of that, but.
All right, anything else from staff? And
Oh,
welcome
you guys
to you.
know who's going to be here at the next meeting, November? Anyone not going to be there?
All right, so we at least have us.
Is there a Lake Shore Committee meeting next month? Since she's taking Nelson's place.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I don't think we have any applications, as far as I know. Everything, yeah, that's come in has been administrative so far, so hopefully we won't have any of those for a while.
Yeah. We generally
All right, so with that, I'll have a motion to adjourn. I think we're done.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night. Welcome to the hood.